In this video, I'm going to tell you how to get out of suffering and a simple framework for the first thing that you need to take a look at to be able to experience freedom that isn't dependent on the circumstances. So, a simple way of looking at this is that the unconscious habit patterns of the mind, they need to be brought up into to consciousness, into your attention, and it has to be felt through. This might sound very simple, and it is, but it's not easy because there's a lot of things that distract us from actually taking a look at our experience. And the primary or most acute distraction is the sense of a separate self. So the sense of a separate self is something that probably 99.99% of people have. And it's very difficult to spot it if you haven't thought about it, or if you haven't got some decent pointing towards it, because 99.99% of people believe in a separate self. They believe that the sense of a separate self actually means that there is a separate self. But those two are two different things. To have a sense of a separate self is just a thought connected to some experience that makes you think that that experience is you beyond experience. And if you listen closely to what I just said, then that's a contradiction, right? There cannot be something apart from experience that is an experience, because then it is an experience. So it cannot exist. But how it works is that the sense of a separate self works as um, a, a comfort and a distraction from the distraction that you are, or the discomfort that you're distracting yourself from. And when we see clearly that there isn't anything apart from experience, the illusion of a separate self kind of collapses or disappears. The analogy that I tend to use is, if you believe in Santa Claus, you live and act as if Santa Claus is real. So every thought that you have about Santa Claus um, makes you do things, um, and makes your experience happen in a certain way. You might write a letter to Santa Claus. You might lay in your bed and make wishes so that Santa Claus would give you the presents that you wish for, and so on, right? So your whole life gets affected by the illusion that Santa Claus is real, by the belief that Santa Claus is real. And it's similarly, the effects of the separate self is similar. So you act and live as if the separate self is real, and you distract yourself from the discomfort that you're experiencing, which is the reason for why these experiences come back over and over again. A simple example of this can be addiction, for example. If you're addicted to cigarettes, the uncomfortable feeling that you're feeling, the craving for a cigarette, is the thing that you want to distract yourself from by smoking a cigarette, right? But by smoking a cigarette, you actually increase the craving, which was the feeling that you were distracting yourself from to begin with. And the same thing happens with any emotion, is that if you don't bring the emotion into your conscious experience, this unconscious or semi-conscious experience, if you don't bring that into your attention and feel it through, you will distract yourself from that feeling, by creating an idea of a separate self and hold on to that idea so that you don't have to feel the discomfort, the feeling underneath. And that distraction of believing in a separate self acts as the cigarette. It lessens the feeling now, but the emotional discomfort will come back again and again and again until it gets resolved by feeling it through. Okay, so this is just a theoretical framework for this and how to end suffering, basically. This is a beginning because there is a lot of things that comes after this that this video is not, it's not the scope of this video, but this video is here to help you see the separate self, which is distracting you from being able to work with reality on a sensate direct experience level. So in your direct experience, which is not the content of your thought, not the beliefs that you hold about what experience is, there is only what you can feel, what you can see, what you can hear, what you can taste and smell, and what you think about that. Basically, what I call those experiences is sensations. So there are feeling sensations, there are seeing sensations, there are hearing sensations, there are smelling sensations, there are tasting sensations, and then there are um, thinking sensations. So thoughts are also sensations, and the delusion happens in the content of thought. So the felt sense of a thought, the qualitative experience of a thought, that is no illusion. That's just what it is, right? It doesn't need any justification. The same as with any other sensate experience, what you can feel, what you can hear, what you can see, and taste and smell. On the senses level, there is basically no suffering because the suffering is the extra layer of resistance, which is actually also a sensation towards those experiences. So that resistance, well, if you're able to catch that resistance on a sensate level, you can actually be completely fine with that resistance, and by seeing it clearly, it will dissolve naturally. But the sense of a separate self, which is the gatekeeper towards experiencing things on a sensate level, is just a thought. And that thought, the belief that the content of that thought is true, comes from not seeing what takes place in your direct experience. So, how to see through this is by recognizing what you see. And if you look in front of you, you see the screen, you see the image of me, you probably see the room that you sit in, whatever. Maybe there is a window and you see what's outside of that. If you then close your eyes and imagine what you just saw, you can recognize the distinction between what you see and what you imagine about what you see. And we can do the same thing with what we feel. So we can imagine a hand, and the imagination of a hand is distinct from the felt sense of your hand, right? And we can do the same thing with movement. So we imagine crossing our legs, for example, and then we actually cross our legs, and we can see that the imagination of crossing our legs and actually crossing our legs is distinct. If we do the same thing with sound, here it can get a little bit more difficult, but if you imagine my voice and what I just said, and you might need to pause to do this exercise or do these exercises, and then you actually listen to the sound of my voice. It gets a little bit difficult because here the imagination and sound is like intertwined. So let's take another example where it probably gets more clearly. If I start to talk in my native language, which is in Swedish, the the meaning of the sound, if you're not Swedish, will not be there as it is when I speak right now. There's the sound, and it's the meaning of what I'm saying is the thought or the imagination part. So the distinction between those two might get simpler and easier. Så jag pratar lite svenska och då förstår du helt plötsligt inte vad jag menar. So then it might be easier for you to distinguish between the sound and the meaning of the sound or the imagination of the sound. But you can do it with just imagining the sound of my voice. Imagine what I just said. Okay, so you see clearly that those two are two distinct phenomena. So that's what we see, feel, hear, and then we have taste and smell. So yeah, imagine you going to the fridge and grabbing something to drink or eat. Imagine how that feels when you put it in your mouth, what it tastes like, and imagine what it smells like. And then you go to the fridge and you actually do it. And you see that those are distinct. So this is basically all that there is to experience, right? It is what we see, what we taste, what we feel, what we smell, and what we hear, and what we think. That's all there is. Where do you find the self in all that? Well, there isn't anything separate from experience. There isn't a separate self that is outside of experience looking in or acting or controlling experience. Whatever you think that that is just a sensation. And so you might need some more help or to to um, to actually see through the illusion of the separate self. But this is sort of where you begin, and then you just examine your own experience, and whatever you'll find is just going to be another sensation. But if you look closely, you see that the thing that you take to be you is not actually who you are. It's just another experience. And an experience comes and goes. And you cannot come and go. Many times for people, it feels as if they are a thought. But if you look closely at experience, can you notice the gap between thoughts? Yeah, so there's a thought, and there's a gap, and then the next thought comes. So clearly you can't be a thought because you are still here, even though there is no thought. Yeah, so this is basically where you can an entrance point to beginning to examine experience and to begin to explore experience from your direct experience rather than beginning with thought, because all thought are dependent on our direct experience. It's not the other way around. It doesn't matter what you think or don't think. Experience isn't dependent on what you think or don't think. And that's where most people get it backwards. Yeah, so in future videos, we will dig deeper into this and take a closer look at what can become a problem after having seen through the separate self. And here there's also a lot of sticking points that it's not the scope of this video that can happen. You might not see through the separate self immediately. For some people it takes years of exploration to do this. Some people never realize what I'm talking about, but it's just an entrance point to ending suffering and to see through some illusory aspect of experience that makes experience way more uncomfortable than it has to be. So in future videos, I'll dig deeper into some sticking points, and if you have maybe had an awakening, or you are really curious about this and want to understand this deeper, and want to bring your personal experience into this, feel free to reach out. I've guided people who have seen through these illusions and who have taken it even further to completely end suffering and live that, and have that as their lived experience, just as I have. Feel free to reach out, and we can talk more about it. Yeah, that's it for this video.